Good morning, everyone. Is it indeed a pleasure to welcome you all to the first National Conference 2021 organized by IIA India Women's Forum. It gives me a proud feeling to have organized this conference collaboratively by chairpersons of all the 6 chapters of IIA India. I welcome all the eminent speakers and attendees from all over the place. The pandemic has helped us cross the borders virtually, where we can attend this conference at the comfort of our home and office. We have all experienced an unprecedented situation with the global COVID-19 pandemic. But someone nicely said, the show must go on. Not that this is the show, but we appreciate your efforts to be together virtually. I'm confident you will enjoy the session as we walk through the exciting journey of the day-long conference. We are fortunate to have the support of a great cadre of sponsors whom you will get to meet at the exhibition stalls. Now I request Mr. Subhashish Nath, head of GenPact, to introduce Ms. Satyavati Berera and start the keynote address. Over to you, Subhashish.
Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you logged in for this very special event. When women are meaningfully represented and engaged in leadership roles or bodies, decisions are more likely to be inclusive, representative, and take diverse views into account. Research studies indicate that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity in their executive teams are 21% more likely to outperform the national average on profitability. Increasing access to resources and women's engagement in leadership in agriculture could increase agricultural yield by 20 to 30%. Countries with a greater proportion of women as top decision makers in legislatures have lower levels of income inequality. Why would all of us not be active sponsors in having more women leaders across all walks of life? Question worth considering, or rather pondering over. I'm delighted to share that for the last 4 to 5 quarters that we've been tracking our numbers very more closely. GenPact's enterprise and risk and compliance team has been ranging on diversity levels between 49 to 51%. I would like to take this opportunity to thank IIA India Women's Forum under Uma's terrific guidance for pulling together an incredible galaxy of speakers for the day, which consciously made me not start by saying good morning, as I'm convinced that fan following of some of today's speakers would have participants logged in from geographies where it would be very early morning, say Europe or South Africa, or be late into the night in parts of the US. GenPact's absolutely delighted in having been able to actively shape and participate in today's event. When I spoke to TK a few weeks back on events of IIA India that we want to be closely associated with, today's IIA India Women's Forum event was an absolute no-brainer. I'm happy to share that as part of GenPact's commitment towards diversity and support towards building out future women leaders in the country and in our profession, parts of today's event would also be telecast on ET Now over a couple of episodes. At this point in time, just to keep it brief, I'm humbled to introduce the keynote speaker for the day, who certainly doesn't require any introduction for us. Someone who has been universally liked in the profession by peers, team members, competitors, and customers alike. Someone who has been a role model for professionals, women and men alike. Someone who is one of those leaders who many more would have liked to have an opportunity to work with. A leader who has shaped the organization that she has given about 4 decades of her life. I'm thrilled, and please join me in welcoming PricewaterhouseCoopers Chief Operating Officer, Satya Berera. Satya, over to you.
Hi, Subhashish. Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And thank you so much for having me over today. Hello, everyone. And good morning to those who are in India. It's a pleasure to be here today, to be part of a conversation that has been for some time at the top of every professional's mind, especially women in the workforce. And it has been a long march for women over the few decades that when I started my career to where we've reached today. And it's really a testament to the concerted efforts of women who believed in themselves, men who've been active advocates of women in the workforce, more women in the workforce, and organizations who truly believed in the power of diversity. So, friends, today I thought I'll start my session, by sharing my own personal journey. As Subhashish mentioned, I have been in the profession for almost 4 decades now. I am a chartered accountant by profession, and I started my career with PwC, which was at that time PW, almost 4 decades back as an article trainee. Started from the ground, and then, of course, did many things, spent a lot of time as an auditor, and after that, did many other things, moved to risk advisory services, then led the consulting practice, and then about 5 years back, I took over the role as the CEO of the firm and also a board member. But today, it's really hard to imagine, when I look back at the time when I actually started, there weren't too many women in the profession. In fact, there were very few firms who actually took women articles. And I was really fortunate that PW was one of them. And as you guys know, most of you probably are chartered accountants, that, in our training period during articleship, you spend less time in your own office, but you actually have to spend more time at the client's office. So while PwC was very supportive, and, the culture was such that one could thrive, but it was a different story going to the client's office, and one could actually see a lot of resentment, and there were, some clients who just couldn't take, having a woman on the other side. Um, but that was the situation. And when I look back, I think it was just sheer determination and passion for what I wanted to do, which kind of gave me the courage. And probably my army background, my father was in the army, which kind of helped me to deal with challenges in a positive manner. And I figured what was not in my control, there was no point fretting about it. But the fact was that I started my training in a situation where there were boundaries in which I had to operate. But I have to say, what really helped was the culture of the organization and the support that I got from my colleagues and seniors at that time. And I think even more important, and some of these things I think, are there to stay and they're still relevant, the support that you get from your family, and the whole system that you have at home, which actually kind of helped me to move on in my career. Earlier it was my parents, and then when I got married, it was my spouse and my in-laws. So I stayed with the organization, worked hard. Many opportunities opened up, which I kind of grabbed. There was a lot of learning. I had to get out of my comfort zone, continue building new skills, gaining new experiences. And that's how my professional journey actually carried on. There were challenges. I maybe don't remember all of them now. There were ups and downs. At times, there were feeling of discrimination. But I think what was important was to keep the long-term goal in mind and to actually move on. And for me, what was most important was that this journey, of 40 years that I have, I actually did it at my terms, which was I kept a balance between family and office. At that time, no one spoke about work-life balance, no one spoke about diversity, etc. But I think that is something that was my principle. I stood by that. I thoroughly enjoyed the journey. I did it at my pace. And today, even after 40 years, I can tell you honestly that I enjoy going back to the office. So that was my journey. But of course, things have, changed quite a bit. I mean, and I could see the shift during the course of my career. And from a very few, women back in the 90s, we have many more, women who are welcomed into the system. In fact, an interesting data by, which someone was sharing with me regarding the ICI, that last year, 42% of the examinees at the CPT level were actually women. And today we probably have more than 80,000 chartered accountants in India, which I think is a long, long way for us to come. So good to have people at the entry level, but I think the issue remains that as we progress in our journey, our professional journey, many of the women drop off, and that I think is still a real issue. And research tells us that between the age of 28 and 40, that's the time when women have to prioritize between family and their career responsibilities. That's the time when the tapering actually starts. And when you go up to even other more senior, it kind of comes down to a very, very single digit in terms of percentage. A recent report by McKinsey, Women in Workplace 2020, actually says that at the entry level, there are 47% of women, but by the time they get to senior management, it's almost 21%. And I think that's the situation in most of our organizations also. Despite all the steps being taken, I think this is an area of concern, and it's a huge loss of talent, what we call the leaking pipeline, where women who are trained and who get the experience but later are not there and are not unable to continue on their leadership journey. So, but having said that, I think there is absolutely no doubt that the needle has moved, and a lot of good things have happened. The appreciation among senior management today regarding the business case for diversity, which Subhashish also alluded to, diversity and inclusion has never been stronger. One does see an urgency in corporates to address the challenges of women and to actually bridge this gender gap. I mean, there's a huge talent shortage. People realize the importance and what women can contribute to organizations, and one can see the urgency. But unfortunately, the needle is moving very slowly. And there was this report by the World Economic Forum, which I think is a little depressing, which actually said if we go at the current rate at which we are progressing, it'll take almost 100 years to fill this gender gap, and maybe another 100 years to bring parity in the workplace. But as I said, a lot of progress has been made. And I thought I'll kind of talk about, the question is that what can we do? And how do we make sure that women who are joining the professional workforce, they don't fall off and they continue on their journey and become leaders in the organization? Uh, I think this is something that needs to be, the responsibility lies with the individual as well as the organization. And according to me, and in my experience, I've probably seen, I mean, there are many things, but there are probably three elements that, is worth focusing on. The first one really is the personal aspiration and the ambition, of women. I think, they need to have that passion, that, the drive to actually continue on the journey and to become a leader in the organization. Sometimes one finds that maybe there it is frustration with all the challenges sector, and somewhere they kind of fall off and they're not able to balance their personal aspirations with their professional aspirations. And if you think there is a glass ceiling, then surely there will be a glass ceiling. So I think that probably is a very important factor that women need to consider. We can keep blaming the organization, but if it doesn't come from within, and if that aspiration and ambition is not there, probably we'll never succeed and we'll never go too far. And I'm sure all of you would have are familiar with what Sheryl Sandberg observes in her book Lean In. She describes leadership ambition gap to account for the poorly representation of women in leadership. Now, of course, we know this is not totally true, but I think it is important to remember that this is our career and we need to take control of it, and we need to see how we want to push it forward. The second piece, which I think is equally important, is the support that you get from the organization, the culture, the supportive policies that you have in your organization, the people, and what they're doing, the tone at the top, and how things work out in the organization. Today, well-intended organizations have a plethora of policies which help women tide over that time when they have to make choices between families and their professional journey. There are policies which help women to come back after the maternity leave. There is so much conversation on flexibility, and in a way, COVID has also established that it works well. So I think a lot of things are happening, but again, there is also this trust factor. I've heard women say, "Yeah, you have a flexibility policy, but are you sure it's not going to impact my career if I avail of it? If I go on a sabbatical for 6 months, will I come back and continue with where I left, or is it going to impact my career?" So I think we need to do better on those things, but it's really wonderful to see how companies are going all out to attract women talent and to retain them by having very, very supportive policies. And the third element, according to me, and which has really helped me, is that we should all learn to build a support system, a network, both formal and informal, in the office and at home. And I think that for women to continue in our journey, I think it's absolutely paramount. It could be, in office, you need teams to help you, to deliver. It is your senior, your boss, who, should actually give you opportunities to gain the experience and to nurture mentors in the system, sponsors in the system. I think nurturing that network, and that also takes an effort, I think is extremely important. So, having said that, let me go to the second part of the conversation, which is delivering impact to the organization. And you heard Subhashri say that the business case for having women in leadership position is absolutely established. We have enough data which shows the qualitative and quantitative benefits of having women in the organization in the leadership position. And there is enough pressure in the system. You see senior management picking up KPIs, etc. So this is a great opportunity to women for them also to continue in an aggressive manner on their journey. The second piece, I think, which actually really helps, from an impact perspective, is what women actually contribute, and they have some skills which really differentiate them. And some of them I've seen in my tenure work very well vis-a-vis our male colleagues also. I think the ability to multitask, because we're already always multitasking, between home and office. I think generally we have a better ability to listen, to be more empathetic. We are great team players. We are great at nurturing talent, bringing teams together, co-creating. And I think some of these things have a larger impact on an organization in a very positive manner, and that itself has a very cascading impact. If I look at the women profession in the internal audit, I think women are great to be in this particular space. I think their eye for details, their strong sense of judgment in a way, their ability to hear beyond the words, and a high degree of integrity, all really helps in making them great internal auditors and great leaders. And I have to share, I mean, I have done so many worked in so many spaces, but my training in internal audit and what I gained from there, I still think I leverage that best in my CEO role. Bringing in risk and opportunity dimensions in my decision making, or whether it is the governance best practices. I think it helps me in making better decisions, and it gives me a much wider sort of outlook to the whole organization. Having said this, I think what is also important is that a few points as to how, as women leaders, we can actually be more effective. And for that, I always believe that sometimes when we become leaders and we see role models, and fortunately, unfortunately, they are male role models, and we try and imbibe them. And here I have to say that it's good to pick up good things from, your role models. But I think don't lose your own individuality. And as I narrated above, there are so many things that women bring to the table which differentiate them, from their male colleagues. And I think those are our strengths. And I think if we were to combine our softer strengths with our technical knowledge and domain knowledge, I think it will be a lethal combination and it will have a brilliant impact on the organization. The second piece is that, even when we grow and we become seniors, it's so important to continue learning, to continue upskilling yourself, and to remain relevant. And there would be skills that you require where you think you're weak vis-a-vis your male colleagues or otherwise. It could be technology skills, digital skills. So, like a doctor, I think, it's for us to keep reinventing ourselves and to keep taking those skills and trying to sort of become better, because it is so important in this dynamic environment that we lose our relevance if we don't kind of innovate and keep reskilling ourselves. The third thing I think is so important is no matter where you are and which leadership position you are in, it's so important to have mentors. And I can tell you from my personal experience that every time I made a career move, went into a different direction, I got great help from my mentor, and in a very rational manner told me and helped me to take the right decision. And lastly, I do want to say that, once you do become a leader, I think it is really a responsibility to become a champion for diversity. And, you need to uplift the other women, because that's going to have a cascading impact. As it is, there aren't too many role models, and it will be a huge, inspiration for others if when we are in our leadership position, we actually do everything to uplift our fraternity. And remember, empowered women are those who empower other women. So I've come to the end of my session. Happy to take any question and answers, Shubhashish.
Sure. Thank you so much, Satya. As always, stuff to take away, uh, hearing from leaders like you. Uh, a slightly sort of tangential question, Satya, which is, as this debate's going to continue, how tough is it for women leaders to make it to the top? If you can't get to the top, how do you influence the culture? And therefore, how do you empower more women, and how do you build more women leaders? So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. So one of the things that I always believed was, if you're an entrepreneur, then you decide what you do. So do you believe that more women entrepreneurs is part of the solve? And do you think women are likely to end up being successful entrepreneurs?
Well, I think women will be have the ability and the capability of being successful wherever they are, whether they are entrepreneurs or whether they are working in an organization along with others. Um, I think the important thing, as I mentioned, is, I mean, it's twofold. It's one, your own urge and your own ambition, and how much you want to go that extra mile. Because I think one thing is to be understood very clearly, no matter what we say, I think it's easier for men to kind of, be on this journey. There are going to be challenges, probably there are going to be more challenges, than your male colleagues have. And it's really your ability to kind of not lose sight of the big picture, your ultimate goal. It doesn't really matter whether you succeed in 1 year more than your male colleague. It doesn't really matter. It's your own journey, and in next 30 years or whatever it is of your professional journey, it doesn't matter 1 year the other way. I think you need to be happy in what you're doing. And sometimes it's also difficult to define success. For me, success was always having a happy family and a happy career, but for some it may be different. And for that, you have to negotiate and keep your own pace and keep your own benchmark. But I do believe, whether as entrepreneurs or whether in organizations, they have the ability to support. A little bit of support required from the organization and their colleagues, really.
Terrific. You did mention, refer to this while speaking, Satya, which is the whole challenge of leaking pipeline. Obviously, it's something that organizations have been trying to solve for. But beyond saying, there's extended sabbatical that you can take, which in some ways is actually available to both men, women alike. Uh, are there some concrete steps that you've seen being successful, either through your own organization or sort of other businesses that you've been close to? How do you actually prevent that leaking pipeline?
So I think it's a great question, and something that we've been struggling for a long time, and especially organizations like ours, which do hire a lot of women at the entry level. I mean, we ourselves have about 40%, and as you mentioned, your organization also. And then it's a really a pity, because the organization spends time training these people and their valuable resources, and then they kind of drop off, and we can't use them or their capability, when they are seniors in the organization. So I think we have been struggling. I mean, it starts with having great policies, supportive policies. But I think somewhere it's not just the policies, it is really walking the talk. And it is really the tone at the top. It's the whole DNA and culture of the organization. You can have all these wonderful policies about, or you can go off for 2 years when you have a baby, take a sabbatical, do flexi, come when you go, have common hours. But I think there's also this whole question, and sometimes rightly women don't trust all of this conversation, because when it comes to evaluation, etc., it's always about, okay, you were on flexi, this person was not on flexi, and so this person gets a preference. So it's there, but I think it's just getting better. And I think, at least when I think about it, COVID has really helped. It has shown us that you don't have to be in front of your boss to be doing work. You can work from anywhere. And I think this is something that should absolutely help women in trying to keep that balance between home and family, spend more time, reduce time on commuting, and all of that. I think this is going to help. And I frankly feel, Subhashis, there's no choice. I mean, there is such a dearth of good talent. And, losing these wonderful women who you have, in the beginning nurtured, and then they just go off, and some of them don't even pick up any other work, and, they're at home. I think it's a sheer waste of talent. And sooner or later, I think, it is going to get right. But the needle is moving, but it is extremely slow, I think.
I know we've just got it for a minute or two more. An interesting question that came through: what do you look for when you decide on a mentor?
I think it has to be someone that who understands you in a way, who understands what you're trying to do, has the at least the way I have, my mentors, it's the way, who understands the context. It's good to give some good theoretical advice and say this, but trying to sort of do it your way, but still trying to help you and reconfirm to you which way to go. So I think it's really the comfort zone which is important for me. And someone, again, is also someone who's kind of done it before, because then I have more confidence in the advice that I'm getting. But it's really the chemistry and the comfort zone, that one should look for. Because you have to trust the mentor, you get some advice and then you kind of back off and say, no, it doesn't work this way. It will not work.
The last one, literally, Satya, which is a little provocative, which is when you try and make change happen, is it good to sort of go overboard a bit? And I'm going to give you an example, which is one of the policies that I've heard and seen work is once you go on, if sort of women leaders go on, let's say, maternity leave, that entire period is assumed to have been at work. And as long as they performed before, they have to be promoted, irrespective of whether the rest of the world likes it or not. Now, some would turn around and say, well, that's almost an insurance cover you have, but so be it. Because if you want to make some of these changes really believable for women leaders versus being policies and theories, you sometimes possibly need to go that extra distance. What's your take on it?
I don't know whether I totally agree with what you're saying. I think, what I've seen and where people have gone is that at least try and maintain the rating of the person before the person took maternity leave and after the person came back. Trusting this whole thing about promotion. I think the woman would also feel uncomfortable, because you want that person to be successful, and the person should feel confident of the new opportunity. And frankly, with a baby at home, etc., if I was in that place, I would actually say, no, I don't want this responsibility, and this is no obligation of the organization. So I think just trying to maintain the rating would probably be the first step, so that you start at the same place, and it's not you've gone, so your rating is also dropped, and then you kind of need to pick up from there. I mean, that's what I think.
Great. Thank you so much, Satya, once again for your time. I know we sort of ran over a little bit, but appreciate your flexibility. I'm sure everyone loved having you.
So
And absolutely like to get
thank you once again for having me, and hope you all enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you, Subhashish.
Thank you, Satya.